All right. Well, hey guys, welcome to another podcast at The Way. This week I am joined by Javier Smith.
Hello.
He comes to The Way, and he actually kind of brought this episode's topic to Travis and I several weeks back. I think he talked to Travis, and then him and I met up. But so we're going to be talking about movies and TV and like how Christians should view movies and TV and media, how we should absorb them, how much we should absorb. Is there lines? Is there boundaries? But Javier, what was it for you that kind of made you want to talk about this?
Well, I've been pretty much in love with movies all my life. It wasn't until I was about, I would say, maybe age 13, 14 that I was thinking, like, maybe I should do this as a career, like get into filmmaking, media, video production, that kind of deal. And that's what I'm currently going to Texas Tech for. But one thing that kind of made me passionate about this is that it just seemed to me that a lot of Christians, like as a whole, seem to not be very observant of film, or like they don't seem to have an understanding on like the importance of it and stuff that goes into it, based off of either faith-based films that I've seen in the past, or just having some conversations with them based off what they watch. And I'm really passionate about the art form and like everything that goes into it, like the camera work, the acting, the script, the writing, all that stuff to make films, and that makes like some of my favorite films of all time. And I mostly wanted to do this to kind of give people and kind of an idea of how we should absorb, because some of them maybe have I would say wrong reasons for avoiding something altogether, or maybe sometimes taking in too much, or that kind of deal. It's just maybe a basic line, and get Christians to be a little more thinking about the actual stories, rather than just see films as a way to waste time.
Yeah, definitely. And I think I would say that's probably like most people are like, I'm just gonna watch this movie or this TV show just purely for entertainment. Like, I just want to enjoy it, and then I don't want to think about it again.
Mm-hmm.
Or they're just, like you said, just to waste time. And then there are people that don't watch certain movies for certain reasons that maybe shouldn't keep them from watching it. But then there are obviously there are reasons that we'll talk about that maybe we shouldn't watch certain movies, like things like nudity and things of that nature.
Mm-hmm.
But then we're also going to talk about should violence keep you from watching a movie? Should language keep you from watching a movie? And I think that something that's important to consider that we'll talk about with all these things is context.
Mm-hmm.
What is the purpose and the meaning behind it? How could it possibly benefit like our Christian worldview and kind of help the way that we see culture and understand culture?
Yes,
and so
very much so.
But yeah, thank you for coming on. I'm happy to talk about this. I think it's gonna be a good discussion.
Very happy to.
But yeah, so the first thing that you kind of have that we wanted to talk about, and one of the first things you mentioned to me was how God loves movies.
Yeah, God.
So, yeah, what do you mean by that when you say God loves movies?
Well, when you look at the Bible, in regards to a movie, movies, essentially what they are is a story. It's a way to tell a story by a visual medium. And the way I see that God loves movies is because of how the Bible is. The Bible is 70% story, visuals, narrative, symbols, imagery, that kind of deal, and also Jesus, whenever he was talking with his disciples, how did he communicate his message and stuff? He told it through parables, and the parables, the characters slash objects slash, the way the story plays out has meaning, in that way. They don't just, these stories don't just deliver a moral, anyone can make a strong, reasonable argument, but a story usually will grab someone way better. A really great story will usually be stronger. And that's why Jesus used stories, because he knew how impactful they are on humans as a whole. So, that's one of the things, is that I feel like God loves movies, is because he uses stories pretty much throughout. The Bible is technically one big story.
Right.
but like in Jesus telling his parables and stuff. So
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think it's definitely true. Like when you look at the Bible and you kind of look at how it's written and what's in it, like you said, even starting from the very beginning, like most of the Bible is paints very vivid, imagery and really um, encourages the reader, whether it was a letter that was written, those less so, but like when it comes to like the Gospels and all the different books in the Old Testament, a lot of it is encouraging the reader to like think and to imagine the scene in the picture, and a lot of it is like very visual language.
hmm
Like when you look at just even the creation story at the very very beginning in Genesis, like that sparks so much like thought and imagery in your mind. And then, like you said, well, even now fast forwarding all the way to Jesus, which is skipping over a lot of story and visuals in the Bible, but
yes,
Jesus, the way that he speaks to people in crowds and speaks to his disciples is basically through telling a story. And when you read some of his parables, like you can really start to really imagine like what he is describing and the characters that he's describing and the meaning of the parable. And so it is um, pretty fascinating. And I think in light of that, I think as a Christian, it would be hard to say that movies are all bad or that movies have no place, in the Christian life, because
yeah.
again, like storytelling and visuals is a big part of the Bible.
Yeah, and it's a big part of like humanity as a whole. Like
Yeah.
that's one of the biggest ways we communicate with each other is to like, oh, the other day this happened to me. Like that's a story, you know.
Yeah.
In that way, and like God is so visual. Like in regards to like splitting the Red Sea, he could have, like when people like draw paintings or do movies, like it's a very beautiful, like it's all splitting up, rising up, they make it as, visually interesting as you can. Like God could have just done something simple, but no, he did that. so like
Yeah.
so like it gives a sense for God's love of, he says like to Moses, like they will see my wonders.
hmm
That's the whole point of him making that visual appeal.
Yeah. Well, and even when we read like, read, Revelation, which is a difficult book to read for a lot of reasons.
hmm
However, it's a very, very vivid and lots of images and illustrations and pictures and things that it paints. And then even going back to the Old Testament, when you look at like the plagues, and when you read through the plagues on Pharaoh, like those stories and those chapters in the Bible are like extremely imaginative and very vivid, like when you read them. And honestly, and a lot of them are not these clean cut and dry stories either. Like there is plenty of violence
hmm
and those sort of things in the Bible. And the Bible is not I would say that the Bible is not PG.
No.
Now, can you PG it down for like children? Yes. And should you? Yes. However, for adults and for college students who are likely listening to this, when you pick up like just an ESV version of the Bible and you read it, it ain't PG.
No.
There's plenty of stuff in it that isn't PG, as far as what it would be like if you just made a movie series about the Bible, and kept it very accurate to the way that it's written. It would be at least PG-13, if not rated R, in
I
plenty
would
of
argue
sections.
R and no
Yeah, because
lower.
of the violence.
Yeah.
Like there's the war scenes and things of that nature. And
I think
so,
to make it PG-13, you would have to cut things out. I
yeah.
think it would be R at a minimum.
Yeah, well, I
But
can tell you, wish they wouldn't make a movie about it, but like Song of Songs,
yeah,
it'd be rated R for sure.
yeah,
Um,
no, and like the Passion of the Christ, that to
yeah,
have that
absolutely.
depiction had to be rated R.
Yeah,
So
to even that movie, I've read a lot of scholars and theologians that say that movie, as violent as it was, it didn't even quite do it justice, likely to how violent the actual crucifixion was.
really, wow.
And so, like, you watch that movie and you're like, oh man, it's hard to watch. And like, I don't think that little children should watch that movie. However, it was at least aiming to be an accurate depiction of what it actually looked like to an extent. And it's very, very violent. But just because it's violent doesn't mean that we shouldn't see it, right?
Yeah. Which I guess kind of leads into the next big topic
Yeah.
we're going to talk about, which is basically like one of the biggest things that that the Christian community I think debates a lot is in regards to how should we view like sex, violence, and like profanity in the films,
Mhm.
like and in culture, media as a whole. Now, there's usually like two opposite spectrums of this: the cultural alarm and the psyche, like There's those that say movies corrupt us, too much sex, too much violence, they're a waste of time, they're dangerous. Those are cultural anorexics, is what the book I read calls them. You know, because they don't know, they stay away from anything in regards to the culture that they think is bad. And but movies, like if they say like movies corrupt us and all that stuff, it's like movies are a part of art, and God gave us art to express ourselves and our humanity.
Hmm.
And like completely withdrawing from movies like and culture is dangerous for a Christian. Like you shouldn't do that. Like the way to be influential of the culture is to understand it and be in it in some way, not be completely out of it.
Yeah.
If you're completely out of it, you're going to be irrelevant in the eyes of the culture.
Well, and you can't. The reality is that a lot of movies that we see today, whether it be Marvel movies or rom coms or just romance movies in general or action movies, like a lot of those movies depict and describe and show like what our culture is into, what influences our culture, what our culture likes, what our culture, maybe some of the things that our culture is doing that God wouldn't approve of, but yet we need to see like what are these people into, what intrigues them, what how can I relate to them? Paul the apostle says that basically he would do anything short of sin to reach somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but then that's where you talked about the extreme, is that there are some people who would say for Christians that pretty much all rated R movies are just complete, taboo. Like you should not watch rated R movies at all.
Yeah, it does kind of get on their skin, because I have met people who says that their parents will not let them watch R-rated movies simply because it's R.
Yeah, or even how many of us had a friend growing up and like they weren't allowed to watch Harry Potter? I think did you say that you weren't allowed to watch Harry Potter growing up?
No, I was not. I could watch it now if I wanted to. I've only seen the first film
Yeah.
of the Harry Potter series, but like I was not allowed to watch that. I was not even allowed to watch SpongeBob.
Yeah.
As a child, and all these things. And looking back on it, I've had some friends in college like talk to me, like when I say, "Oh, I've never seen SpongeBob," they're like, "What? Why?" It's like, "Mom thought it was stupid." It's like, it's not stupid, it's smart, like,
Yeah.
and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, there are people who will not let their children watch this stuff. And in regards to like particularly my mom, I can understand why.
Yeah.
In regards to Harry Potter, and like because of witchcraft, wizardry, and stuff. But at least like when they let me get older, they say it's your decision what you watch.
Yeah,
So,
as a parent, parent your children how you see fit. And again, I think that it's okay for when it comes to children to, kind of maybe keep them from more things.
Yeah.
But now,
absolutely.
like I said, probably 99.9%, if not 100% of the people watching or listening to this
Mhm.
are adults or young adults, so they can make these decisions for themselves. But then there are some people so there's that extreme of like it's all taboo, like anything, even a lot of PG-13 movies like you shouldn't watch. It's bad. It's gonna corrupt you. It's gonna pull you away from God. There's that extreme. But then there's the other extreme, which is basically like you should watch anything and everything. Like if there's a movie that has 10 sex scenes in it, like it's okay, you can watch that. Like there's also the extreme of like taking or setting no boundaries and having no line for yourself on what you watch. And I think as Christians, we do have to have a line when it comes to movies, when in regards to especially sex and even profanity and maybe violence, depending on the context of the violence and the reason why it's in the movie, what it's trying to portray. So there's definitely those two extremes. But I think you would agree, Christians probably should be somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, like I would say, honestly, I would say in regards to like where I am, I would say I am further on like what they call the cultural glutton, because
Yeah.
there are a lot of things that I watch that I would say some argue like, why would you watch that? I guess my love for just film and stuff.
Yeah, something you're passionate about. And so like when
Yeah,
you're passionate about something, maybe you would watch more things than some people would,
yeah.
but you have a specific like reason and purpose as to why you're watching it.
Yeah, I feel like most people who say like don't take it seriously, like, oh, it doesn't matter that it has all this in it, it's only for entertainment. It's like if you're saying it's only entertainment, like avoiding analyzing movies can make you believe that only there's entertainment in film when there's so much more. And but movies are just all, like I said, about something.
Yeah.
in that way. You know, the like characters confront an obstacle and overcome and have a big change by the end of the journey and stuff. And and all these things, it's like if you avoid looking into like the things like this movie saying them, especially if it's like violence, like, oh, it's just violence, like, but why is this violence here? Or like, why is this sex here? Like, do you think like that this is good? Do you think that this is like necessary? Because if they don't think that, then they're not really
Yeah.
looking into
Well,
it.
and also like the danger of just watching movies, purely for entertainment is that if you do that and you, I guess, are a, like you said, a cultural glutton where you watch a movie just purely for entertainment. And let's say that you are watching movies that have, sex and violence and those things and you're watching those for purely entertainment, then what that means is that over time, those things like sex are going to be what entertains you. And that's the only
Yeah.
way that you view it. And that and that is where I do believe that sex, violence, profanity, and when I say sex, I'm not talking about like I'm specifically talking about like nudity in movies as for when I say that. So, but it gets to a point to where those things are certainly causing you to sin because when you're watching a movie, because you are actually looking at those things purely to entertain you. And I don't know that that should be the case. Sometimes, yes, like when I watch like the Fast and Furious movies, there's a lot of violence in them to an extent. It's not like super gory. They're PG-13.
No.
But I am looking for like the violent, crazy car scenes to entertain me, right? Like that's
we're not saying that like you should never go see a film purely for entertainment. You can see a film. I go see films for entertainment,
for sure, but it can be both and, right?
Yeah,
like,
both and like there's some times when like I just want to watch a movie for fun, and like Fast and Furious movies, like I like to watch for fun. Like they're fun, entertaining, car chasing, action packed movies and stuff. But there's also other films which I'm more like aware of and analyze more and pay more attention to. But like there's nothing wrong inherently with watching a film just for entertainment value. It's just I feel like most of them only do it for that and never take into account like the deeper meanings behind what you saw.
Well, and I think that what you're getting at is that for a Christian, when you go and see movies, obviously, like which we can't really go to the theaters right now. There is one in Lubbock that opened up this past week at the mall, and I almost went to a movie this weekend. We had some friends in town, but we decided not to. Anyways, when we go to the movies, like yes, you're going to be entertained, and you're going to watch like when a new Marvel movie premieres. Like I'm a big Marvel fan, and so when a new movie premieres, like I go to the premiere, like the first night it comes out, I go see it. And I enjoy it, and I'm going to be entertained. But also, like I have two of my close friends that we will like critically break it down afterwards and talk about it and talk about the purpose and the meaning behind certain things. And I think that what you're getting at is that for a Christian, when you go to a movie and you want to be entertained, but then when you also analyze it and you consider the meaning and the purpose and the context, I think it's actually going to help you relate to culture. Which if you can relate to the culture, you might be able to share Jesus with the culture.
Yeah.
But also, I think it's going to guard your heart from starting to just see it purely as entertainment. And I think so. I think there's a lot of benefit to being more critical and analytic when it comes to movies. It doesn't mean that you don't see it as entertainment, but after the fact, like maybe take a few minutes and like whoever you watched it with, like go, hey, like what do you think about this scene? Like that was really interesting. I wonder what they meant by that. Like, it's good to have those conversations.
Yeah, like one of the biggest gripes personally with me in regards to anyone, it's not just, Christians, anyone. It's like if we watch a movie together and then we come out and say, what do you think? And they say, I like it, don't like it. And they don't expand on it after that. Use just 3 words and that's it. It's like, okay.
Yeah. Well, my biggest thing, like, I don't have a problem. Like if someone says, they come out of a movie and they're like, man, I love that movie. And usually they'll tell you why, but when someone's like, I didn't like that movie, and I ask them why, and they can't say why, I'm like, well, you can't say you don't like something if you don't know why. I don't know, I just didn't like it. Like,
Yeah, at least I wish for that. So, yeah, that's the idea in regards to these things. Is that there has the idea is that Christians should have a sense of balance when it comes to the things they see.
Yeah.
Just to break it down into simpler terms. So, but yeah, on regards to the sex, back to the sex, violence, profanity, because that's the big topic.
Yeah, those are the 3, like, I guess the 3 big, like like things that would, I guess, potentially or could or should keep a Christian from watching something is sex / nudity, violence, and profanity.
Yeah.
And you, I guess, could group in like, uh, drugs and stuff into that as well. That I would just consider that to be a part of like violence, I guess. But
Yeah. So the thing is, in regards to like, if someone's wondering, like, okay, should I or should I not watch this movie, which has one, two, or all three of these things? I would say the biggest thing that you go with is what is the context of it. So this movie has violence. Well, what's the context of the violence? This movie has a lot of nudity. Well, what's the context of the nudity? Or profanity. What's the context of the profanity? So if one says that we should never see these things, if no matter the context, then they haven't read their Bible, because in regards to sex, violence, profanity, it's in the Bible, a lot, like we've said. And the thing is that just saying that we shouldn't see these things because it's bad. It's like, no, God has these things in His Word, so He has it in there for some reason. The biggest thing is to know what the reason is that you are seeing this right now, because yes, like in regards to nudity. A lot of times it's just thrown in there to appeal to like getting
it's sex appeal. It's
sex appeal.
The reality is that most movie and films, like the big Hollywood ones, their goal is to make money.
Yeah,
and they know if they put this actress in the movie and they have this actress nude, it's going to drive sales, because the reality is because we're a broken world and people struggle with lust.
Yeah.
And sex and lust sells. And so if that's like purely the context of it, of the sex or the nudity, I would say like 100% avoid it, because their goal is literally to get you to lust.
Yeah.
Now, if there is a romance movie that maybe is about this couple that falls in love and they get married, and there's a scene where maybe it doesn't show nudity, but it's suggestive.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that it's bad or terrible for a Christian to see that, because for one, you can see like the context of the sexual content. Like, is it within marriage? Is it before marriage? Like, what was the purpose of that scene? Did it cause them to break up afterwards? Did it create baggage for that relationship? Were they married, and was it a beautiful thing? Like, like we see, I just got done studying Song of Songs with a group of guys. On Monday mornings, and that's a book that has a lot of very sexual imagery within it, but it's purposeful. And when you read it, that God is trying to show that sex within a marriage is a beautiful thing.
Yeah, that's the context. The context is that this description of them taking a love sexually with each other's side is within the realm of marriage, which God absolutely encourages.
Yeah, and I know we're kind of jumping around as far as which one we're going to talk about, but I guess since we're talking about like sexuality, like I will say for me, I draw a hard line when it comes to nudity.
I can understand that, definitely.
Yeah, well, especially with me, like a part of my past, which if you've come to the way or heard me preach or talk, or you had coffee with me, like you've probably heard me share about my testimony, and that's lust and pornography and sex before marriage. Like those were things that that plagued me in my relationship with Christ, and sins that I struggled with. And so like an example would be Game of Thrones, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I've heard how amazing this TV show is. I've heard from so many people that Game of Thrones is amazing. Yeah. It's so amazing. Oh my gosh. But I also heard from the very beginning that, particularly I think in the first season or two, that there was a lot of nudity. And so for that simple reason, I never watched it, and I never will. And again, maybe I'm missing out on some really good content and story and stuff, and I'm sure to an extent I am. But for me personally, to watch that, I know it's not worth it. And so that's where when it comes to sexuality, I draw the line there. 99.9% of the time. Now, if there's a movie that I go and watch, or a TV show, and there happens to be like one scene that I didn't know about, I'm not going to be like, oh, I can't believe I did that. Like, I'm okay. Like, I'm a married man, and usually I'm watching movies or TV with my wife. But if I can avoid it and I know it's in there, I'm not going to see it. And another example for me when it comes to nudity was like the first Deadpool. I had no idea that was going to be in the first Deadpool. I knew it was going to be pretty raunchy because it's Deadpool, and that's kind of his comic book character. But there was basically a full-on, sex scene in the movie, and I felt a lot of conviction for it. Especially because I posted about going to see it with a bunch of my friends, and I was like leading in a youth group at the time. And so I knew I was basically encouraging a bunch of these like high school and middle school boys to go and see it, and they should not see that movie because there's an attractive woman that they literally just, use this scene to sexualize. And so I've never watched that movie again. There's a lot that I enjoyed about the movie, but I've never watched it again because of that. And then before seeing Deadpool 2, I made sure that wasn't going to be an occurring thing, and it wasn't. And so I saw Deadpool 2, which was much more tamed. I don't know if they got backlash, or I don't know. Anyways,
No.
That's where I draw the line for myself when it comes to sexuality. Now, does seeing a couple in a romance movie like The Notebook, where they're falling in love and like they're in the house and they're kind of, and they basically, they kiss and then it kind of basically the scene fades
Leaves
off,
it,
but
yeah.
you know what they're about to do.
Yeah, you know what they're gonna do.
Does that cause me to sin as a Christian or stumble? No, I honestly, I see it as the story of love, which has flaws, and I see the flaw of them having that premarital sex and the baggage, because you notice right after that, a lot of the pain and the heartbreak they experience when they separate for a while, I think, was increased by that moment where they, gave into that together. And so that's where I'm like, I think that's okay for a Christian to see that or to watch that.
Yeah, like in regards, I'm similarly in the boat, like in regards, and I would say I would be happy. I'm a video editor. If you ever want to watch Deadpool again, I can edit out the stuff you don't want to see.
Yeah.
I'd
Or
be
like Game
happy
of
to do
Thrones,
that
maybe.
But like for me, in regards to sex and violence, like I'm totally on like, and even a lot of people who I'm friends with who are not Christians also kind of agree with me on this. They're like, yeah, we're not fans of sex on the screen for the sake of like no reason other than to get butts to seats.
Yeah, it's
and
usually
stuff.
unnecessary.
Yeah, it's unnecessary. It's just filler. It's just something, to appeal. Like, oh, we got to check off this demographic who wants to see this, hot stuff in the movie.
Right.
To me, there are examples, like I said, where it's more earned and more worthy. Like, for example, there's a movie called Her, directed by Spike Jonze, and I saw it recently. It's one of my favorite films of all time, and definitely maybe my favorite, if not second favorite, romance film. There is a sexual scene in there, but it's not presented in the sake of like, just throw it in there. It actually has purpose and meaningful because first of all, the scene is completely black. Like they don't show any visual stuff. Well, but that's because also like the movie Her is about a man who falls in love with his AI.
Interesting.
Because the AI is so like lifelike, real, passionate, caring, and stuff. And basically they kind of have a somewhat of a makeout sesh through just talking, since the AI is not there. But it's more built up. It's more like they're more intimate. They're not just having sex for the sake of sex. Like they're more passionate. They care about each other. And also, like I said, it's black.
Yeah, so it's
don't
not
see-
showing anything.
No, the
Yeah.
whole context is that I think one of the contexts in regards to like the scene like being black, because it's black when this goes on, is to say like this is for them and they're intimate and not for you.
Yeah.
But yeah, that can be, that's just my interpretation. I can understand.
Sure.
why
Well, yeah, and even like maybe even for most people, like would probably be something that they shouldn't see. But I also think that it's interesting because that almost kind of that's a very interesting storyline like a movie about a guy falling for an AI. But
it sounds weird, but it's honestly not.
But here's the thing, and it's not AI, but here's where I could see that as like showing the flaws in society is, you have the massive issue in the world of pornography.
Mm-hmm.
And how many guys essentially, and it's not intimate and it's not special, but they essentially fall in love with the screen. And they get addicted to the screen, and it's this false reality. It's not real, and it's causing them to stumble, and it's separating them from God. And so I think, even something like that could almost kind of paint that picture and kind of illustrate that within a movie. And, and,
Yeah.
and so I think stuff like that could be okay, especially if it's not showing anything and there's some sort of purpose in it. Again, it's not the worst thing in the world that you could see, and it's
Yeah.
not one that I think, examples like that, where it's a sexually suggestive scene, but if there is some sort of deeper meaning in it,
Yeah.
I don't know that I
I'm
can
more
say
lenient.
across. Yeah, I don't think I can say across the board that Christians shouldn't see that, depending on the age. Again,
Yeah,
and
for
also
sure.
depending on where you're at in life. Like for me, again, I'm 25 years old. I'm a married man. And I watch 99.9% of the stuff I watch with my wife. Like stuff like that. My wife and I watch together usually, like romance movies, and that doesn't do anything to me. Now, a 16-year-old kid who's struggling with lust, probably shouldn't watch that kind of stuff, and maybe not ever, depending on who you are. And so,
Yeah.
I think for everyone, it's important to, when it comes to sexuality and movies and TV, draw a line for yourself, and then when
Yeah.
you draw that line, see if it fits within the boundaries that Scripture would set for you.
Yeah, like to me, my take on it is that I have like if you're gonna have a scene of sex or nudity or stuff in it, have it be more at least minimally for me earned, or like have a purpose.
As far as like the story and the
Yeah,
context and the
like there's
purpose
many
goes,
stories that have like let's say like outside of marriage sex, but to show like but to say like that's not a good thing.
Yeah, it
It's been
shows
done
the
that and like
damage.
shows like
Yeah.
oh this is not a good thing. Like I believe I haven't seen the film, but I believe that's one of the things of the film To Save a Life. Have you seen that?
I don't think I have. I'm not sure.
But the story is basically like teens they had sexual intercourse and it resulted in basically one of them getting pregnant, and like the deals of like abortion is a topic of it, in that
Gotcha.
way, but it's to show the consequences of these kind of actions.
Yeah.
It shows the consequence of if you do this, your relationship can have a fallout. Relationships are not the same after you have sex with them, especially outside of marriage.
Yeah, and I think that movies a lot of times show that, like, whether it's good or bad, as far as how they portray it. The reality is when you look at that compared to Scripture, like God clearly shows and says that sex outside of marriage is bad, and it's funny that our culture actually illustrates that a lot more than they realize.
Mm-hmm.
But then again, there are movies that illustrate the beauty of it within a marriage and those kinds of things. But
Mm-hmm.
anyway, so kind of moving on from sexuality, again, I think it's important that you draw a line somewhere. For me, it's nudity, and then also just pointless, meaningless, like sexual.
Yeah, I think
draw
most
the
of
line,
us.
you
Yeah,
know?
I think most people can say like if it has no purpose other than basically to turn you on, then yeah, it's like
Yeah, is this gonna
pornographic and it's not
cause-
necessary.
Yeah, if this is going to cause you to stumble or lust, then you should not watch it, and you should not encourage anyone else to watch it either. And so, but yeah, so then the other two that we kind of talked about a little bit, but not as much, is violence and profanity in movies. Let's talk about violence in movies
Yeah, so there's a good amount of movies out there that have violence.
or TV.
Or
too.
TV,
I know we're
yeah,
talking
for
about
sure.
movies a lot on this, but just understand that
Media.
we're kind of focusing on movies, but movies, TV, media,
Yeah,
all of these things
online.
apply across the board.
Across the board. So, the thing is that there is a good amount of violence in the media now these days, in a way. And how should we view this stuff? Because that's definitely something else besides, sex and nudity. Like that's one thing that a lot of parents have their children avoid.
Yeah.
Because it can be a bit,
Yeah,
like, not
again,
good
for
the young
children,
one.
like
Yeah.
probably not the best, but
Yeah.
again, for young adults and stuff, and for adults,
Like we have, like for example, like if like there are examples of violence in the Bible, like
lot of
Judges,
examples
like
of
Judges is a very good example book of violence. Like there's this, I believe it's 3:16 through 26. It's about what was his name? But basically, the story is like there's this servant who goes up to this really fat king, who's been like tyrannical and stuff, and then he like servant walks up to him, takes out his sword, thrusts it into his belly, and like the whole imagery is talking about like how he thrust and also describes like basically the body parts coming out of his stomach after
Yeah.
the sword's been inserted. It's like,
Ehud,
Ehud.
and then
what was the king's
king
name?
of Eglon, king of Moab.
Yeah.
I think.
So yeah, so he stabs him through that, and it talks about like it's because, but in the context of it, it's an act of like justice in a way, because I think the king he was like treating the place bad. He was tyrannical and stuff. He had to be put in his place.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
and with that story again, like for a little child, I would be like, oh yeah, I would be like, and let me get his name right. And Ehud, like, yeah, he poked the guy in his belly, and then he just, went to sleep, like,
yeah,
or he died. Like, I would probably not like try to paint this vivid picture,
yeah,
but when you read it in scripture for adults and for even teenagers, I guess, it paints quite the violent imagery. Like you're talking about, and we all know if you took a giant sword and you stab a guy, it's gonna be violent. It's gonna be gory. Like there's just no way around it. So I think that's just a prime example that God doesn't want us to not see that.
yeah, yeah, very much so. There's just many like, for example, one of the biggest things that people say is like, I hear some Christians say like, "Oh, I'm not going to see this because it's violent," or whatever. But then they say about like, "Oh, I love the Passion of the Christ because of how brutally depicted." It's like,
Hmm.
okay, well, what's the difference? The difference in those two films is context. Like, Deadpool is definitely a film that capitalizes off of its R rating
Yeah.
and violence for sure. That's a part of it.
Yeah.
In that way. But there are films like I would say that a lot of people like the movie Saving Private Ryan
Hmm.
because of its realistic depiction of war
Hmm.
and like what these people went through, and like it's to serve the greater message of fighting for what you believe, fighting for your country, standing up in times of like harshness and things, and like what these people did for their country or the
Yeah.
sacrifice.
Well, and like another example, something that I watched is there's like an HBO series a long time ago called Band of Brothers,
Hmm.
and it is a phenomenal series, and it's about World War II, and it's extremely graphic and very like real, and that was kind of the point of the series, was to essentially show people like just a glimpse of what war is like.
Hmm.
And there's a lot to take away from it. There's a storyline of following the troops, and you see troops losing fellow soldiers, and it's a very very like powerful and good series, but it is extremely violent. And again, and for some people, maybe they would draw the line, and that's fine. Like I think that when it comes to movies, you've got to draw lines for yourself, and if you feel like violence is going to for some reason cause you to stumble or put you in a place where you don't want to be, then yeah, don't watch it. But I think most people, um, I think, will be okay with seeing violence, because if not, then you probably
Yeah.
got to be careful about reading your Bible, and how much you think about it, because there are things in the Bible that are very violent, especially when you think about them while you're
Yeah.
reading it.
Again, it's the context that is the biggest factor in terms of what you're seeing it. Because yes, similarly to nudity, like some people use it as a to capitalize. It's
Hmm.
like, oh, I'm showing you this because you love violence and stuff. But there are different like showing a war movie. Like you have to like showing it in its gritty context. Like you can't just not show like the depravity of humanity in a way. Like there can be reasons in showing like this depravity of it, like the reason of showing like in Passion of the Christ, like the violence that Jesus endured during his crucifixion was to show what he did for you.
Hmm.
Like he did this for you.
Yeah.
All this, he went through all this. That's the context of showing that. And also like this is what really happened,
Yeah.
like I feel like if you are censoring it, like you can censor it maybe for the wrong reasons. Like some movies like should show it to show like how far we can fall and how far humanity has
Yeah. Well,
fallen.
and again, censoring, it's like for some people it might be a good thing, but you're in a sense shielding people from the reality of this world and the things within it, and the brokenness of it, because I think and the reality is a lot of people try to shield themselves from how broken this world is. Like they kind of want to just
Hmm.
like put the blinders up, and they're like, okay, I got Jesus, like there's nothing else going on, and they kind of want to live in this like false reality, like happy-go-lucky, like I got Jesus, everything's good. And it's like, it's actually not. Like this world is broken and it needs Jesus, and if you shield yourself from that, across the board in your own life, in movies and TV, and you have no connection with what is actually going on in the world, it's going to be hard for you to be, you know, to be able to go and effectively reach people that are in the culture.
Yeah. And, you know, basically, I guess to sum it up, is basically, again, it's just the context in regards to violence you're seeing. Why are you seeing it? What is the point of it? Like, one of my biggest examples is there's a film called Come and See, which I would argue is, even in regards to depiction of like the brutality of war, is even worse than Saving Private Ryan. But the point of that is not to show like, oh, violence, yay. The point of showing that was it was an anti-war film. It showed basically a boy being enlisted, like I believe in Russia, but basically somewhere in either Europe or Russia. I'm pretty sure it's Russia. And he's thinking like he's going to go to war and like, you know, fight for honor, glory, that kind of deal. But by the end of it, he's just depraved, and he like all the cruelty and stuff he's seeing is like stuff he never imagined. And the point of showing that was like, and showing this was like, we let this happen. We let World War II happen. We let all this terrible stuff happen to all these people, the Jews, etc. We cannot let it happen again. That's the point of that movie,
Yeah.
you know, and I think it's very effective. You know, it's not showing violence for the sake of appealing to your darker side or something. The point of that was to show we need to do what we can to not have something like this happen in the future.
Yeah. Well, and you know, I'll even say like when it comes to violence, like obviously a lot of men in particular, like we like action, we like, you know,
Yeah.
those crazy scenes in Fast and Furious, and we like war movies because to an extent, like it's almost like in our nature to see these things, and to like when we see like a super cool fight scene like in, you know, John Wick or one of those movies, like most guys are like, man, that was amazing. I don't even know that that's all bad.
Mhm.
I think it
No.
depends on how far you take it. You know, one of my favorite TV shows of all time is The Walking Dead. And The Walking Dead has a lot of violence and a lot of gore in it, but it's also one of the major reasons why I like it is, one, it's kind of cool to see, you know, like, okay, if the world was ending and if zombies were real, which I don't, they're not, but like if they were, it's a pretty fascinating story because you follow basically like this group of people, this family throughout all of these years of, you know, post-apocalypse, and you see the different storylines develop in the people, and like you start to care about these characters. So I don't just enjoy The Walking Dead because I see, you know, gory zombies, you know,
Mhm.
getting their heads cut off. Like that's really probably far from the main reason why I watch
Yeah.
the show. I watch it for the story and for the people and the characters. And so, you know, and so like for
Yeah.
me and myself, like, yeah, I enjoy the crazy zombie scenes, but I also mostly enjoy just the characters and the storyline. And so again, ask yourself, like, and maybe this is another good thing we can mention is ask yourself, like, why am I enjoying watching this?
Yeah. Like,
Is it just because I like to see the violence or whatever it may be? Or do I actually like the movie for a lot of other reasons that could be more beneficial or reasonable to, you know, to like
yeah,
something?
I would say one of my examples would be the John Wick movies. You know, like, why do I like watching that? It's not because of violence. It's because John Wick is a person who gets like kind of betrayed. Like he gets
Mhm.
like, spoilers, he gets his dog, you know, killed.
Yeah, if you haven't seen the first John Wick by now, sorry about you.
Yeah.
Or the second one, sorry about you. Again, they've been out for like 5 or 6
I think
years.
it's even in the
so-
plot synopsis, but basically,
Yeah.
like people, like he gets screwed over, after like the death of his wife. Like he had this dog that was a gift from his wife who passed away, and then somebody breaks into his house, steals his car, kills his dog and stuff, and John Wick goes after him as a sense of justice / revenge. You know, that's in the sense of like, I like John Wick because he goes to get justice for himself,
Yeah.
not because he's killing all these
Well,
people.
and
This
he's
is-
also a very, you know, hurt and angry man. Like he's
Yeah.
hurt because of his wife, and now you add his dog on top of that, and so, you know, it's also depicting this, you know, this hurt and this broken man and how far he's willing to go to get some sort of revenge or justice. And so I think that there's a lot in that storyline, but also it is entertaining. Like the action scenes in that movie
Oh,
are
yeah. They're
phenomenal.
well
The guy
chore-
actually trained in like weapons and tactical shooting and combat for that movie, which is why it's probably some of the best like combat scenes of all time,
yeah.
and you know, choreography. And so again, is it wrong for a guy to go see that movie and enjoy it? No. Now, in the extremely rare, if not even I don't even know if it's ever happened before, but like if that somehow encouraged you to start to like want to do that, which is there are people that are like, if you see that, you're going to do it. And it's like, really?
No, there's literally no evidence of
Yeah.
like you see like the excuse of if you play GTA 5, you're going to want to go shoot up a school or something. Like, no, there's no
Not
evidence.
unless-
It does not influence you that way.
No,
Never.
unless you're someone who already has severe mental health issues.
Yeah.
And even then, like, I don't know if there's much evidence for that. So that's really not a valid argument. Like, you shouldn't watch that because it's going to cause you to want to do that. It's like, honestly, I've watched a lot of violent movies and I've played a lot of violent video games. Never thought about killing somebody before. So I think I'm okay.
So yeah, so if that's your concern, you can know that you are pretty much factually wrong. There's been many studies on this. It doesn't. There's not any evidence. There's some slight correlations, but that's the best it goes at.
Yeah. And now, could violence in movies and video games, could that become an idol for you? Yes, it could. And if that's where you're at, you need to realize that and draw the line.
Find your balance.
Yeah, exactly.
So
the last thing, I guess, or last of those three main things is profanity.
Yeah. So profanity, you know, that's a big thing my mom doesn't like. Like she doesn't like cursing in movies, the use of the F word, use of the S word, etc.
Yeah. I don't love it. Like I wish it wasn't in there, but the reality is you know, in high school, like you go to school or you go to a restaurant, you go to a mall, or you go to even a sporting event, like these words are unfortunately deeply rooted in our society, and you're going to hear them all day, every day, depending on where you're at. And some would say, well, maybe you shouldn't, you know, expose yourself to them even more. I don't know that that's necessarily a valid argument. I mean, if you're someone who struggles with the use of profanity and you're trying to break that habit, it might be good that you don't expose yourself to more of it. But as someone who doesn't struggle with profanity, I don't know that there's any harm in hearing those things, especially, again, considering the context. Why are those words being used? Is it out of anger? Is it to, you know, like there's all kinds of reasons why those words could be used.
Yeah, very much so. Like, for example, like in regards to some examples of profanity in the Bible, I have 1 Kings chapter 12, verse 10 through 12. Basically, it translates down to a girl telling the king, like, my little finger is thicker than my father's thumbs. Basically, that's a men genitalia joke, you know, in a way. Say, basically, you know, because that's the way that some people like to measure their manliness, is how big their genitalia are.
Yeah.
And she's saying, like, basically, nope, you don't have big genitalia. My little finger's bigger. You know, like, so that's an example of profanity, technically, in the Bible, in that way. You know, and other ones is like Ephesians 2, 11 through 16, which is about Judaizers telling Gentiles they have to be circumcised, you know, severed from Christ, you know, seeking to be justified by law, which in that kind of case back then is kind of in a use of profanity. Not too much though.
It'd be very vague. It's almost more of a jab to kind of like get them to say like, hey, you're not like us.
Yeah.
Unless you have this, which could be profanity. It's definitely hurtful.
Yeah,
that's for sure.
Again, like Galatians 5:12 is Paul, which is a line that he said. I believe he's talking. If you want to go ahead and look that up, right now. But like he's talking to a group of people he basically doesn't like in the basic realms, and you know, and like has a lot of issues with certain people in their way. And he basically says in this verse, like, I wish that those who are troubling you would even mutilate themselves. So, like. Yeah, that can be a form of profanity, saying mutilate yourself. So, you know,
he's basically talking about some people. There are people that he's essentially kind of defending the church in Galatians, saying like those who trouble you, those who are still preaching circumcision, you know, against you. And he's basically saying that's offensive to the cross. Essentially, is what he's saying, and he's like, I wish that those who say that would.
He's basically going against like the religious zealots, I guess.
Yes.
The practices of all that, you know, like this is not how you're saved anymore. We have Jesus now.
Right.
So yeah, those are some examples. And to me, in regards to profanity modern day, like to me, that's just everyday life. Like in the real world, people are going to curse. Now, some curse more than others, just depending on what it is. Personally, I don't really curse that around most people. Depends on who I'm with. But I usually do not curse unless if I get like super angry or passionate about something. and especially like not around mom and dad. Like I don't curse around them,
Well,
because they don't want that.
and the reality is like the reason why like profanity is an issue is that when if you are using profanity, obviously like those words don't glorify God. They don't depict Christ and His love, and so using profanity, it doesn't represent Christ now. Now hearing profanity, I don't know that you can make that same argument. Some could say that you are dishonoring God by exposing yourself to that language, and I don't know that I can get there because it is basically unavoidable.
Yeah.
Whether now
Yeah,
you can
in a way
say
it
that
is.
by watching that movie that you are willingly exposing yourself to that language, but also I would respond to that with like that's not my heart or my purpose. Like yes, I know that's in the movie, but I'm not going to watch the movie so that I can hear some profanity. If I wanted to do that,
No.
I could go out to eat at a restaurant and listen to the conversation across the aisle from me.
Hmm.
So I'm not going to the movie because I want to hear cuss words or anything like that. I'm going to the
No.
movie because I want to see. Because even like in the Avengers, right? There is a few curse words throughout the movie. I'm not going to the movie to hear the curse words because I get some kind of enjoyment about hearing. No, I'm going because I want to watch the movie because of the story and the action and the characters. Like I don't care about the profanity.
Yeah, in a way, I would say like it also can be contextual. Like profanity in other like cultures, like I think like Britain, like to them, like what we would consider curse words to them is like normal words they use
Yeah,
every
it
day.
depends on where you're at around the world as far as what means what.
Yeah, and like also like in regards to your Avengers example, like they kind of make fun of, like it was a Age of Ultron where like
They make fun of Captain America because he like
he said language, don't
Yeah.
talk bad language, and
Yeah.
they constantly make fun of him for it. It's just everyday. Like to me, it's just everyday life. Like this is how the world is, and also when you interact with people, especially who may be hostile, like let's say you're at a march or something. Like let's say you're at a pro-life march, and there are people who are pro-choice. They're probably a lot of them might curse at you and stuff.
Yeah.
But that's just the world,
Well,
in a way.
And I think to an extent, like I don't want to get to a point to where like, yeah, I don't like cussing necessarily. I do think that in terms of movies and TV, a lot of times profanity is used to try to emphasize a point or a joke.
Yeah.
And whether right or wrong, that's usually the goal. I think there are some movies and some TV shows where it's just overused, and it gets to, I do get to a point where I draw the line, I guess, with profanity, and where maybe as Christians viewing media, where you should draw the line is when it's just like excessive, and it's like
Yeah.
okay, at this point, there's literally no reason for the language whatsoever, and it's just like it's too much. It's like overbearing, and it's taking away from the rest of the sentence, and it's like a distraction almost. Like I draw the line at that, not necessarily because it's causing me to sin, but just because I don't really want to hear that. Like it's just
Yeah,
not,
sure.
that's I guess where you could draw the line. But I guess that what I was going to say before I went off on that tangent is like when it comes to profanity, if I'm so uncomfortable around profanity that it just anytime I hear a cuss word, it bothers me. The reality is that I encounter people every day, every week that I talk to that use language. I actually don't want to make them feel uncomfortable or
Yeah.
judged because they're using a cuss word, because that's where they're at in their life, and
Yeah.
I want to make them feel comfortable. I want to have a conversation with them, and I don't want them to feel like I'm uncomfortable or that I'm judging them because of how I respond to them using a cuss word. Like, man, if I'm meeting someone for the first time and maybe they don't know Jesus, maybe they do, and they're cussing a lot, like hey, talk how you talk. We can still have a conversation. Like I'm fine hearing a cuss word. I would actually say if profanity bothers you that much, I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing or not. If it bothers you that much.
Yeah, to be honest, I don't know anyone other than maybe my mom and dad where cursing, like even cursing itself doesn't bother them. It's excessive use. That's mostly what bothers them more than anything.
Yeah.
But like a lot of people, like in regards to cursing, that's just normal life. Like this is how people interact, engage as part. Like if I would like the movie Marriage Story, when the couple argues, they do curse because they're emotionally driven. They're hurt, they're frustrated and stuff. It makes sense for them to use this language to express their passion. If they were to say something like curse art thee, it'd be like, this is unrealistic. Are we in a Shakespeare movie now? Like this is not language that people like in Lord of the Rings, they use words like curse and stuff, but that makes sense because of the tone. It's fantasy. It's in this, fantasy world and stuff, olden days, kind of tale. But like realistically in modern day and stuff, like that same language would not apply. Like this is how people talk and interact, especially when they are emotionally driven. Like that to me is in the sense, like, can there be excessive use? Yes. And to be honest, I don't think like it affects a lot of people in a way. I don't think being exposed to like if you hear the word, it'd be like, oh, how dare they're not going to be
Yeah.
like, okay, like we're just get used to it. Like you kind of have to build up to it because as you get exposed to it, you're kind of like not used to it at first, but as you go throughout life, it just bothers you less and less, in my opinion.
Definitely.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
So I think, when it comes to Christians and when we watch movies and TV and the way that we view media, when it comes to kind of those three big things of violence, sexuality and profanity, draw a line for yourself. It's good to live to those convictions. Consider what you struggle with, what is going to cause you to stumble or cause a friend to stumble. But also, and ask yourself, why am I enjoying this? Why am I watching this?
hmm
And be sure to consider those things when you're watching movies and TV.
yeah,
But I think that what we've talked about today, I think that the reality is that when it comes to movies, um, violence and sexuality and profanity, um, it's likely that those things should not always keep you from watching a movie or seeing a TV show. Actually, a lot of times it's okay to see those things and to hear those things in movies, because when you're watching a movie or watching a TV show, you're not watching it for the
hmm
sole purpose of those things. You're watching those things because of the story, because of the characters, and because of the visuals and the enjoyment. And so, again, draw lines for yourself. Consider, what may or may not cause you to stumble when you're watching media and consuming media. And like with anything, all of these things can become an idol in your life. And so, for Christians, if anything is becoming more important to you in your life, or something that is consuming more of your time, than maybe God is, then it's an idol for you, and you should consider that when it comes to movies and TV and media. But
yeah.
so we are about an hour in, and so I think there's a good chance that we're going to have to probably have another episode on and dive into some more things on this, maybe with Travis next time. But
Yeah.
as we're kind of closing up on just what we talked about today, is there kind of any final words or thoughts or things that you wanted to discuss?
So, I guess just to quickly go through, there are some people who have some rebuttals and use some verses, and I
Yeah.
just want to
Yeah.
quickly clarify that. Like, one is Philippians 4:8, which is whatever is true, honorable, and pure. Think on these things. It is pure to proclaim Jesus' love, but it's also the same as saying like Satan is the father of lies and the false prophet are his minions. Basically, if we ignore the darker side of truth, then it's only a half truth.
Mm.
And that can be the thing. It's like if you only see the pure and stuff, and you don't see like the fall, like the world and stuff, then like you can be only exposing to yourself half of the truth. Like seeing the fallen world as it is, that shows like how much you need Jesus.
Yeah.
In that way, and like um other things like that. Is it right and true to not talk about the consequences of sin or the judgment that's put upon us? Like basically in that way, like there is a reason like for seeing the evil stuff. Like it can show the need for redemption or the need for a savior, that kind of deal.
Yeah.
And there's many other ways it can be used. And then there's a couple more here, like Psalm 101:3. David is saying, their verse is basically saying like, I will never, like people interpret it as I will never like see evil things. I will never like do evil things. And like stuff, like what he's saying is there is like, he will never is that he will never try to expose himself to it. Or like, he's not saying that I will never, ever see anything evil again in my life. Like, no, he's saying that he will, the context and translation reveals that he's saying he won't live the sinful, worthless lifestyle.
Yeah.
He can see it, but he chooses not to participate.
Right.
So, yeah, those are some rebuttals that I feel like some people may say, and that I feel like here's my argument for that. In my conclusion, I would say to those, like the biggest thing is the context. Again, to the sex, violence, profanity you're saying. What is the point of it? Like why is the director / filmmaker why are they choosing to show you this? Is it for a reason? Is it just for entertainment value? Is it just to appeal to your, turning you on, or just like, oh, you love violence, right? Like, no, that's exploitation.
Yeah.
That can be seen as exploitation. That's a selfish use of something, especially like I would say 50 Shades is a very exploitation of
Yes.
sex.
Christians should not watch 50 Shades of Grey under
Yeah.
any circumstance.
Yeah. So, and the thing is that that's my biggest thing. Like when I watch movies, it's like if I'm seeing something, what is the point of it? Because again, these stories have meaning, and in movies, you should see that they have meaning. What is the point of them showing you this? Like, of the violence? What's the point of this violence? What's the point of this sex? Like, the point of the violence in Passion is to show what Jesus took for you. That's the point. It's not to say, oh, violence, it appeals to you, right? Like, no, it's to show what Jesus took on for you so you don't have to.
Yeah.
What is the purpose of you seeing these things? So, that's basically my biggest thing, is to be more aware of why you are seeing it, and not just because you are seeing it.
Yeah, like how could this help me relate to culture better? How could this help me understand culture better? How could this play a role in my conversations with people, and how can I relate to people better through seeing this? There's all kinds of things that you can take away from, secular movies and TV. And I think it's important for Christians to consider that,
Yeah. Like, that's my biggest thing to all listening, is that I wish for you, like, when you see sex, violence, profanity in the movies, like, if you personally don't want to see it, that's up to you. Like,
Yeah.
like I said, like, if you think like it doesn't help you, or it influences you in a bad way, that's fine.
And that's where you need to draw the line.
Yeah.
For you.
Yeah, in that way, it's your life, your decision. But when in regards to when you do see it, if you're a person, I would ask you to not be saying like, oh, it's bad. I would ask you to say, well, okay, it's bad, but why is it bad?
Yeah.
Or like, is there a reason it is showing to you? Just think about the why. Why is it showing you these things? That's my biggest takeaway when it comes to this, is just be more critically analytical of why you're saying these things, because it could be for a good reason.
Yeah. And so I think, I think that kind of wraps it up. Christians need to have a good balance when it comes to these things. And Christians need to draw the line for anything that might cause them to stumble or sin. That's where you need to draw the line. And so, man, I appreciate you coming on today and having this conversation. And like I said, if you're listening, there's a good chance that we will probably talk more about media and movies and TV in the future, because there is so much to talk about. Some things we could even do is maybe pick a few movies in the future and kind of break them down and see.
I'd love to do that.
Kind of how they could relate to the Christian worldview. And so, anyways, thank you for listening, and be on the lookout for more episodes in the future. Again, Javier, thank you for joining us for this discussion today.
I appreciate it very much. I'm happy to be here, and thank you for letting me have this opportunity.
Yeah, definitely. So, all right, guys, thanks. Hope that you guys have a good rest of your week.